find more homeless resources to get them off the streets, more spaces for youth to hang out at, fix potholes, and increase trash and debris pickup. And finally, tonight, 4 senior members presented to Youth Council with their reasons for being nominated for the AWC Scholarship. After the presentations, members voted to nominate Alexandra Corona Hernandez. This concludes our report. We're happy to take council questions now.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the report. Any questions by members of council to the Youth Council? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you for your report and also for the actions that you and the rest of the council have taken to come up with the recommendations that you shared. Was wondering what plans would you have to share them with the greater community of youth within your schools or in Lakewood?
Share what particularly?
Okay, I mean, are you planning to publicize them internally within the schools so that this is what you recommended to us, or how are you going to go about letting the community know that these are your recommendations?
Not at this time, but we're going to look into it.
All right, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. I think you've made an excellent choice. I've worked with Alexandra before. She's awesome. So tell her I said congratulations. Thank you.
Councilmember Laura Sella. And we all need to remember to speak a little closer into the mics.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Especially the handheld ones.
And thank you for your presentation and your recommendations. I wanted to know if we could get a copy of those recommendations distributed to council so we can help push for those things.
You may.
Any other questions? All right, very good. Well, thank you again for coming tonight. We appreciate it, and we wish you a fantastic holiday season.
Yes.
Aha.
There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And next we have the school district report for the Clover Park School District with Board Vice President Brian Thomas. If he is here, I don't see him in the audience. I don't know if Board Vice President Thomas is on Zoom.
Mayor Whalen, I don't see Mr. Thomas in the audience, and he is not present on Zoom this evening.
Very good. So we will move to the public comment portion of tonight's agenda. And for this, I think we'll have the commenters either come forward. We have a handheld mic, I believe, that will be available for them. Very good. Thank you. Perfect. So public comments are accepted by mail, email, or by live, virtual, or in-person comment. Comments may be submitted in advance by mail or email to our city clerk, Brianna Schumacher, at 6000 Main Street Southwest here in Lakewood, or to her email address at bschumacher@cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to an hour before the meeting have been provided to the council electronically, and for purposes of maintaining a record, our clerk will now read the names of those who have submitted written testimony in advance.
The City Council received no testimony in advance of this evening's meeting.
Thank you very much. Members of the audience may comment on those items pertaining to any city business during the public comment period. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes each. We ask that you identify yourself by name and residence, such as Paul Boki, City of Lakewood, and then you'll be provided your 3 minutes to speak. Please note we do have a public hearing today. The public hearing is on the 2024, it's to set a public hearing for the 2024 final budget adjustment. And so if you'd like to speak on that topic, that will be later in the agenda. This is for the general public comment period. Outside of the folks who are here and have signed in or are here to provide in-person comment by Zoom is also allowed. If you'd like to join the Zoom meeting to provide public comment, please dial the telephone number 253-215-8782, enter the meeting ID number 868-7263-2373. And once you're in the room, please raise your hand so the clerk can call on you. I don't have the ability to do it. So she will give me the high sign since we're in kind of alternate quarters right now and let me know if there are folks here who wish to make public comment via Zoom. So first I'll call on those folks who are here physically for public comment. The first person is Daisy Gould Wong. And come on up and we'll have the microphone. The city attorney has the microphone there. You can either sit in the witness booth if you like, or you can stand. And again, thank you for your flexibility. Welcome. Great.
My name is Daisy, City of Lakewood. Good evening. Last month, I spoke at a Sound Transit board meeting to push for action regarding the elevator to the pedestrian overpass at the Lakewood Sounder Station, which has been broken for 2 years. Afterward, a board member informed me that the City of Lakewood shares responsibility for this elevator. That's why I'm here today, to ask you to work with Sound Transit to finally get this elevator fixed. As someone with difficulty climbing stairs, this has been a grueling experience, even causing me to miss my train twice. But this isn't just about me. With the hospital next to the overpass and a new transit-oriented development going up in the area soon, this accessibility issue will only become more urgent. It is imperative that this elevator be repaired immediately, not eventually. If the City of Lakewood cannot manage this repair, I urge you to transfer responsibility to Sound Transit so they can repair it as they do for the elevators they're responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know about that. I appreciate that. Gould Wong, or is that? No. Next is Abraham Mirjalini.
Hello, good evening. I'm Abraham Mir Jalili. Of course, the city council knows me well. I don't know if the member of the audience. Well, as I was looking at the consent agenda for tonight and looking at items 16C and 68D, I can see that these two items alone, the amount for $81 million annually, provided they do not change and it stands as they are. Well, needing the money is one issue, collecting it is another, properly investing it is more important, because these funds has to be paid by the residents of the city, and some they can afford it, others they may not be as fortunate to be able to contribute. My concern is that if this is basically done because the city has the power to enact ordinances, pass its own rule, and proceed to do as it would think that it's best to act. Or it is as a part of to tax, collect, spend, and some of it, of course, waste. Speaking of waste, I am looking at, for example, the Edgewater Park. I understand that they want to have to raise $2 million for that. Well, that has to be paid by the city resident. My understanding was that from the beginning, they wanted to get some grants or something, and that's why they condemn our home. Of course, it remains to be seen what would be the outcome, but nevertheless, when I look at this, it makes no sense. $2 million for a parking lot. One strip of land. That's one item. Do you know, I'm sure there are other items around the city. Of course, maybe some resident may not be as vocal. I have came and couple times I mentioned that I understand that you want to have some funds and you want to have some fundraising, but issuing a permit for a single rental, family-owned rental is not a good idea because that family has to pass that cost and more to the renter who can hardly afford to pay for that rent. I want to ask the city to do away with that because that would not
Thank
be
you.
fair. My apology. Wouldn't be fair with the big companies versus a single person. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is the last individual who has signed in to address the council during this public comment period, at least the last one who's physically in the audience, but I want to make sure if there's anyone else here who'd like to address the council during the public comment period physically.
Mr. Mayor, I've been swinging through just to check if there are any stragglers, as have some of your other city employees, just making sure that there's
Very
no
good.
straggler. We haven't found anyone back there.
Thank you very much. And so now I'll turn to those who may be appearing virtually to provide public comment during this public comment period. Madam Clerk?
First, we have Christina Minetti.
Very good.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Christina Minetti, Lakewood. I'm ashamed and profoundly disturbed by Lakewood's decision to support the tiny home village in Spanaway, sited in a major wetland complex with what should be protected Garry Oak woodland and old growth forest with endangered western gray squirrel habitat, despite being told by multiple people and by best available science that they should not. I was there during the groundbreaking when, behind their celebratory speeches, some of you went, one could hear the sound of gigantic 6-foot blades cutting down the trees at breakneck speed, followed by large thuds. I walked down tiny Wasman Road, and never before had I breathed air so thick with the smell of sap. I felt it in my throat, and it made me sick. This area was designated by Pierce County as a biodiversity zone to be prioritized as open space. Pierce County forgot about that, and none of you seemed to care. I don't recall any of you vociferously defending the watershed, environment, and habitat. Why did none of you insist that the tiny home village be made somewhere that was already destroyed, such as the disused Kmart complex on Pacific? When you see an undeveloped parcel proposed for development, you must always ask, can't we do this somewhere else as redevelopment? It would be closer to amenities and services for the residents. Or did you want to put them on the far end of a 90-acre property beyond the swamps? You should have agreed to donate this money only if the project were put in a place that was being redeveloped. Redevelopment needs to get the kind of incentives that affordable housing has gained. Incentivize protection and good stewardship of the environment for a change. The catchwords affordable housing and homeless, and especially homeless veterans, are like magic wands that make anything possible. Greater density, trashing of critical areas that should be protected, quick rezones. And anyone who criticizes is attacked as anti-homeless or anti-so-called affordable housing. Or is there some other motive here? It just would not be logical otherwise. We, of course, have come up with some good likely motivations. It will be interesting to see how long it takes for those to become reality. This council will be forever guilty of committing this crime against nature in Spanaway and our watershed. Prioritize the environment from now on. It's not too late to start. Nothing else matters if our environment is trashed, and it is being trashed with your help. Thank you very much. Good night.
Any other virtual hands raised?
Next, we have James Dunlop.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, my name is James Dunlop, and I am a Lakewood resident. So, I often walk past Edgewater Park, and in sort of late November, December, and it's always pretty much deserted. There's even in daylight, and a few people use it. They might walk their dogs, they might have small boats, but it seems that for most of the year, Edgewater Park is basically not used to any great extent. And I don't think any development of Edgewater Park is going to change that. And this really does make me wonder why. Why has the city put so much effort into Edgewater Park. And when I went to some of the public hearings, and this question about why this emphasis on facilities for larger boats, why do you need this parking lot, why do you, the Dr. Mujallili's house, what is the reason? No one actually came up with any good reason. I mean, I know that there was this mantra of accessibility. I mean, the city uses whatever mantra suits it. Sometimes it's accessibility, sometimes it's private property owner rights, whatever. It just depends. It depends on what the city wants. And it seems to be that, this just reminds us, as I've perhaps been saying a couple of times in the recent past, is that the city is, as far as I can see, but the city bureaucrats, their basic role is to maximize income. I mean, maximize how much money is coming in, and there is. I think there's quite a lot of academic research on this, and so it's all about getting grants. And it really doesn't really matter why you get that grant. Or what the grant is for, you just have to get it. And it doesn't really, that grant very often makes Lakewood worse. I mean, for example, the infamous example of the sidewalk on, I think, Phillips near Hutloff, which was where you destroyed numerous, several, I don't know, was it 6 Gary Oaks? I can't remember offhand. Just because you couldn't go onto the other side of the road. So. The question is why, and it just was a reminder that the city is just a means for gathering grant money, and it's not actually about making Lakewood a better place. And this 8 million or whatever you want to spend on Edgewater Park and other projects, it's not about making life better for city residents. It's actually just about creating new jobs, new status within the city. And it's all about the city as something quite parasitic on the city of Lakewood. And it's just a shame that city councillors can't recognise this. And I suppose maybe the problem is that so many of them are themselves employees or dependent on municipalities.
Any other hands raised?
Next, we have Dennis Haugen.
Thank you.
Dennis Haugen from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, previously a resident of Lakewood. It's rather interesting about bureaucracy. I remember in 2006, I went into the school and took pictures of food that we were feeding the kids. And that's 19 years ago. And of course, during that time, I learned things about bureaucracy, that bureaucracy really doesn't come from any kind of common sense control. But I was rather surprised that Robert Kennedy Jr., who's slated to go to be head of the Health and Human Services, Health and Human Services, whatever, he showed a box of some of the same sugary cereal that I showed 17 years ago. That shows you how much progress we made. We think about feeding everybody, but we don't think about quality or nutrition. But another case that's even greater is, of course, after 9/11, we spent all kinds of money on security, and then all of a sudden we just flipped it about 4 years ago and said, everybody can come across the borders, okay. In practice, that's exactly what happened. Now we have crime affecting every little town everywhere, and we call it migrant crime. And but it's very interesting. Tom Homan, who is slated to be the border czar, is a very determined man. And then in this background, we have these local officials like governors and mayors saying, oh, you come into my city and I'm going to stop you. And Tom Homan just responds, if they try to stop me, I will arrest them. So let's see what happens. You're a sanctuary state. Don't think your governor is too competent. And we'll see what he does. Let's see what goes on. That's going to be entertaining. Because as they come out to take all of the criminal migrants out of the country, some of these mayors are serious. They're gonna be entertainment for us as we watch them be drug away and thrown in the hoosegow. Thank you very much.
Any further hands raised, Madam Clerk?
Mayor, there are no other virtual hands raised at this time.
Very good, then I'll declare the the public comment period closed. We'll now turn to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the City Council study session of November 12th, 2024. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of November 18th, 2024. C, approval of claims vouchers in the amount of $3,664,439.42 for the period of October 16th, 2024 through November 15th, 2024. D, approval of payroll checks in the amount of $3,175,905.04 for the period of October 16th, 2024 through November 15th, 2024. E, motion number 2024-83, approving a grant agreement with the Washington State Department of Transportation and U.S. Department of Transportation to conduct a downtown transportation feasibility study. F, motion number 2024-84, authorizing the execution of an interlocal agreement with the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife and expenditures to repair the boat launch at American Lake Park. G, motion number 2024-85, authorizing the execution of an agreement with Camino to upgrade the permitting system and supporting development guide and application portal. H, motion number 2024-86, confirming Mark Schmeiber as the City of Lakewood hearing examiner. I, motion number 2024-87, reappointing Kyle Franklin and Michael Lackady to serve on the Community Services Advisory Board through December 15th, 2028. J, motion number 2024-88, canceling the City Council regular meeting of December 16th, 2024, and the City Council study session of December 23rd, 2024.
Thank you. Any council member wish to remove any item from consideration at this time? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
And moved by Councilmember Brandstetter, seconded by Councilmember Laura Sella, that we adopt the consent agenda as presented. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The consent agenda has been adopted. We now move to the regular agenda, public hearings and appeals. Madam Clerk?
This is the date set for a public hearing on the 2024 final budget adjustment.
Thank you. Before we begin, we'll have an overview on this from our Deputy City Manager, Ms. Kraus.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. The revised Code of Washington states that a public hearing be held in connection with the budget adjustment process. That public hearing is being held this evening. The purpose of the proposed budget adjustment is to appropriate the $2 million set aside for the Economic Development Opportunity Fund for Edgewater Park and downtown parks. By way of background, on November 15th, 2021, the City Council, via Ordinance 764, established an Economic Development Opportunity Fund within the general fund ending fund balance for the purpose of accumulating funds for economic development purposes. The set-aside amount was approved in the 21 and 22 mid-biennium budget adjustment, and that was $1 million in 2021 and another $1 million in 2022. So we've held that in ending fund balance over the years, and this evening we're asking the City Council to appropriate and use the funds for the purpose of Edgewater Park and downtown park. This item is scheduled to come back to the City Council for consideration and approval on December 9th. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Any questions of Ms. Kraus before we move to the public hearing? Seeing none, thank you very much. This is the date set for the public hearing on the 2024 final budget adjustment. If you wish to speak on the public hearing topic, you may step forward and provide your name and residence for the record, and you will be provided your 3 minutes to speak. We will have the opportunity for virtual comment as well. The first individual who is signed in to provide testimony during this public hearing is Mr. Abraham Mergelini. And sir, if you can hold the mic close so we can hear you, that would be great.
Hello again. I'm Ibrahim Mir Jalili. I'm a resident of Lakewood, as you know. The reason that I thought I should talk about this is that I understand that the state for the next few years might have a shortfall in its budget. I'm not sure if if the city has looked at that or not and has incorporated in its own budget. Provided if the city has not considered it nor incorporated it and want to adjust its budget, maybe it needs to adjust it again. And that means that the city resident will not only have to pay more in taxes now, but also will be surprised in the next few years. I would appreciate it if you would look into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience who wishes to provide public testimony during this hearing on the 2024 final budget adjustment? And before we turn to those appearing virtually, Madam Clerk, do we have any written comments that have been submitted, or written testimony that's been submitted in advance of tonight's public hearing?
Mayor Whalen, we received no written testimony in advance of this evening's hearing.
Very good. Then we'll turn to those who may be appearing virtually.
First, we have Christina Minetti.
Ms. May, you may proceed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Christina Minetti, Lakewood. I just wanted to say that I'd like to ask that you reject this budget adjustment for accessing an additional $2 million to develop this tiny scrap of a park. I live in the neighborhood of Edgewater Park, and from the beginning, I have been opposed to this proposal. Like the Spanish saying goes, aunque la mona se vista de seda, mona se queda. I don't know. Seems like, it is a small park. And no matter how much money you pump into, I don't know, 5 million, 8 million, whatever it is in the end, it's still going to be a tiny park that is going to be overloaded. It's already overloaded. It's tiny. It attracts too many people as it is, especially in the last few years. And improving it will only aggravate the problems inflicted on the neighborhood. My street is made more dangerous by trucks with boat trailers speeding by on the curve behind the big hedge. And there is trash, there's pollution in the lake, there is noise pollution, it disturbs the wildlife, it disturbs the neighbors, and it's not good for the environment, obviously. It's an obscene total amount of money to improve this tiny park. I think the city should improve it in terms of improving the habitat, getting rid of invasive species, which is never done there. It's full of blackberries, it's full of all kinds of stuff that shouldn't be there. It's polluted by, waterfowl feces. I don't know why you want to invite more people to swim there when there are black amoeba in the water there. It is just a bad idea all around. And, this is not a reasonable expenditure of taxpayer money. I don't care where it came from. If you're shifting it around, it came from somewhere originally, and it came from our pockets in the end, right? So I would like to ask you not to make this budget adjustment, not to pour money, millions of dollars to develop that tiny park, and just to leave our neighborhood in peace, improve it as it is, and make it a little oasis of peace and quiet and habitat. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Next, we have Dennis Haugen.
Very good.
Dennis Haugen, resident of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, formerly of Lakewood, Washington. I don't suppose that budget has got any grant money in it. Like a previous speaker, grant money comes with strings attached. And those strings are created by bureaucrats thousands of miles away. And the bad thing about grants is it makes local city councils dance for the bureaucrats and not for the local people. And I think that's a very sad thing, and in my opinion, they're destructive. And I hope that we're coming into a point where we do away with some of these grants, or we just pass money down without strings attached. Because it's the strings attached that cause local people, local city council people, and local bureaucrats to totally ignore what's good for the city. And listening to some of the zoning that you've done, it sounds like you're planning for a lot of more homeless. Well, my opinion, a lot of the homeless, I don't think you'll be able to solve by the way you're doing it, because there's a thing called debit cards. We're hearing about them all the time. And then one documentary, reporter asked a homeless person, "How do you survive out here?" Well, you know, in Seattle, you have good weather, you can survive year round in a tent. And the guy just says, "Well, you know, what I do is for food, I just steal it." And of course, it's, you know, you don't enforce the theft rules very good. So the stores just put it back on you and you pay for it. And then he says, "For my drugs, I get that off a debit card," say. And we're finding debit cards being given out even before people come illegally in this country. So I'm wondering how you're going to, I mean, with John Holman and some of these people that are appointed, they're tough people and they're not going to back down. They mean what they say. And, you know, so it's probably something you need to think about. And I think there's a couple of former speakers that kind of might agree with me. I don't know. Anyway, you got a tough problem to solve, and I think grants are a big part of it.
Next, we have James Dunlop.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
My name is James Dunlop. I'm a Lakewood resident, and I suppose I want to continue with my sort of previous public comment. And I've just listened to Dennis Haugen, and I would, I think, agree with some of his sentiments, and certainly in terms of the distorting effect of grant money and the idea that I think it seems to me that Lakewood seems to regard grant money as just free money. Of course, taxpayers, whether that taxpayer is in Lakewood or on the other side of the country, it doesn't matter. That money does come from taxpayers. And also, when you have a sum of money just being dumped on a community, it's not organic. And as I said in my previous comment, the role of this money, the purpose of the money, the beneficiaries of this money, this, for example, this $2 million which you're looking for, it's not the city, it's not the people in Lakewood who benefit from this. It's the city itself as a bureaucracy. It has nothing to do with, absolutely nothing to do with ordinary people in Lakewood benefiting. They will not benefit. All it does is it inflates the bureaucracy. It helps support salaries in the city. It helps with the creation of new jobs within the city, of course. So that with, you know, the kind of the jobs that I suppose you know, that residents of Lakewood, I suppose, have to pay, those who are paying property taxes. So it doesn't help. And so this grant, this $2 million, I think that this grant, you know, you don't need it. You don't need to develop Edgewater Park. It's fine as it is. I mean, okay, of course, there are local initiatives. $2 million is a massive amount of money. And as I said, the people in Lakewood are absolutely not going to benefit from this. I mean, I know that you claim they benefit, accessibility. People who don't have access to lakefront properties could, in theory, go there and benefit from it. But in November, I go there in November. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter how you develop it. In November, no one's going to be there. And really, for most of the year, no one's going to be there. And so you don't need this $2 million. So in conclusion, just forget it and just try and be a bit modest and stop relying on other people's money. Stop relying on grant money. Grant money does not help the people of Lakewood. It only benefits the city bureaucracy.
Madam Clerk, any other individuals with their virtual hand raised?
Mayor, there are no other virtual hands raised at this time.
Very good. Then I will declare the public hearing closed. Now that the public hearing is closed on this topic, I do want to make a clarification per our Deputy City Manager Kraus. The adjustment on the budget is to utilize these funds not just for the improvement or acquisition of property related to Edgewater Park, but also for the downtown park. So it's not just one particular project. Second, the $2 million is not a grant that the city is receiving. It is monies within our budget that are being allocated by council directive after the public hearing, and assuming the council approves at the next regular city meeting that those monies will be expended for those projects. So I just want to make those clarifications. Next, we have ordinances. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 822, adopting amendments to the 2019 Shoreline Master Program.
Very good. And for this, I'll call on our planning manager, Ms. Spear, to give us an overview of ordinance number 822.
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is on page 123 of tonight's packet. And as was discussed last Monday night at the study session, this is the other side of the coin, if you will, for the work that was already done with the 2024 periodic review to update the critical areas ordinance and to move some of the water bodies that are regulated by right now Shoreline Master Program over to the CAO. So this now makes changes within the Shoreline Master Program to reflect the change you already adopted on September 16th. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Spear? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Spear, when we had the study session, there was a talk that we would make these locally identified changes. And then it said 2029 is the next scheduled review of the program.
The Shoreline Master Program is on a 10-year periodic update process, yes.
So some of the things in the program are subject to consideration of new information or new science or actions, legislative actions at the county, regional, or state level. What's the procedure to do between major review amendments to this? Is that incorporated into the annual comprehensive plan docket, or are they able to be introduced as they come up?
It is by statute at least every 10 years. And so our next 10-year time would be 2029. But what we're talking about tonight actually is what's called a locally initiated amendment outside of and more frequent than that 10-year cycle. So if the council were to want to do another one of those before 2029, you can. What we did this year was partner and do our public hearing process in partnership with the Department of Ecology, which just streamlines the process. Otherwise, it has to go to 2 levels of review rather than just 1. But that is something that if the council wants to do between now and 2029, you could.
So that essentially what we approved tonight is set in stone, but it's kind of like sandstone. It's soft enough to be malleable.
Just as the city code is and the comprehensive plan is, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions of Ms. Spear? Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adopt ordinance 822?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Boki, seconded by Deputy Mayor Moss, that we adopt ordinance number 822. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of ordinance 822 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance number 822 has been adopted. We now turn to ordinance number 823. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 823, creating chapter 9.16 of the Lakewood Municipal Code entitled Endangerment with a Controlled Substance.
Thank you very much. And for this, we have our city attorney, Ms. Wachter, to provide a brief overview and I believe a response to a question posed by council.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Heidi Wachter, City Attorney for the City of Lakewood. And last week, we reviewed a proposed ordinance that was identical to that requested by the county. At that time, my suggestion was that when the county says this is what we need, they may be looking for uniformity. I have received word back from the elected county prosecutor that while they're concerned with general uniformity, they don't need precise uniformity. That was not the issue. However, they had considered proposed language about exposure to and felt that there were some vulnerabilities to that particular language in terms of legal challenge for vagueness. I've got the language that she sent back to us. It is up to the council whether or not they wish to add that. I believe in light of that advice, the options are you can choose not to adopt any legislation, which I think would be the worst option if you're trying to show some kind of solidarity with the county on the issue, and the council seemed to express some genuine interest in this topic. The second option is to adopt it exactly as it's proposed, which would not give you the language of exposed to. And the third option would be to amend it to include the exposure element with possible risk to that. And my recommendation there would be to make sure that we have within the ordinance itself severability language. What severability language does is it allows a portion to be challenged, and if the portion fails, the rest of the ordinance doesn't fail with it. Now, that would not save the ordinance from perhaps looking like it had a target on it. So there is one other option, and that is to adopt the ordinance as it is and bring forward separate legislation specifically going to the exposure piece that would segregate that issue into its own area of challenge. With regard to the potential for putting that language into ordinance language, after looking at the advice from the county prosecutor and the reason that they didn't use the language, I will tell you that the prosecutor has their own discretion as to when to actually prosecute cases, and they would probably be specifically looking for other elements that are not as vulnerable as that particular element. And similarly, when we're advising the police department, which is part of what the legal department does, is we would be tending away from enforcement of language that we felt had a vulnerability to it. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. And just for clarification, even though the recommendation for countywide uniformity of this particular proposed ordinance was articulated by the county prosecutor, it's fashioned as a gross misdemeanor. It would not be prosecuted by the county.
Correct, although when I sent word out, the three different people that they had on there were the county prosecutor, the chief criminal who is responsible for felony, and the misdemeanor lead. And it's true that they're proposing it as a misdemeanor because they can't ask us to propose it as a felony. And I don't think the county has the authority to adopt felonies either. I think it has to come from the state legislature. And so what they want to do is they want to show that this can be useful and that the cities are all interested in it, and they want to go back to the legislature and pose this. They made an effort to do so last year, and it was Representative Roger Goodman who specifically shot down the exposure to language as being vague, and that was an issue. The one other potential risk there is if that language is vulnerable, and I think legally it might be, and there's some kind of litigation that comes back to the city on it, that can be a little bit of a death knell when you're going down to the legislature and asking them to look at potential felony language, because they're going to say, well, you guys are tied up in litigation on that as it is. Even though it's as to one particular piece, it creates enough of a scuffle, if you will. The legislature, as you know, has lots to do during January and February. And if there's a reason to not look at something, they're more than happy to move on to the next thing. So that's something else to consider.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Wachter? Thank you, Ms. Wachter. Seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt Ordinance 823 as presented?
Move adoption of ordinance 823.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Boki, seconded by Councilmember Laura Sella, that we adopt ordinance number 823. Any further discussion? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have concerns about the scope of this ordinance with respect to Lakewood. I appreciate that the county prosecutor, who in recommending this ordinance, has said that their absolute uniformity amongst all the jurisdictions in the county is not required, and that there is some room to be able to amend it or add nuanced language. But I am concerned that our purpose in passing such an ordinance is to protect children and dependent persons in Lakewood. Our purpose is not primarily to get a piece of legislation passed in Olympia at some future time when it is. And as I look at this ordinance with the deference to the city attorney about the value of whereases, I understand that whereases are not part of an ordinance or the law, but to me, they are statements of fact, and they do indicate rationale on the part of the council for what we are going to do. And in this proposed ordinance, there are two particular whereases that are of significance to me. And I'm looking at this on the list of ordinances on page 2. There, the second to the last whereas says that it says, whereas exposure to controlled substances is a threat to the health and safety of Lakewood residents, especially so for children and dependent persons who are in close proximity to individuals who use illegal substances. That's a whereas that first of all, I believe to be true, but that I believe that the ordinance in its current form doesn't actually address or deal to. And there is also a whereas that is on the on the same page, but further on up, but it's the fifth whereas on that page that says, whereas the Washington Poison Control Center had 111 cases in 2020, which involved the accidental exposure of children ages 0 to 5 years to opioids and opiates, and it's believed that many other cases go unreported. And I believe that that is a 2020 report statement of fact. I believe that is something that is true today, and perhaps more so, being able to go through and do that if we were to get updated data. I certainly don't believe that the number of accidental exposures by children and dependent persons has gone down. So particularly to sort of address those two particular concerns, I would like to offer an amendment to the ordinance. And so what I would look to amend section 9-16-020, which is in Exhibit A, and subparagraph A, and to read that a person is guilty of the crime of endangerment with a controlled substance if the person uses an illegal controlled substance in the proximity of a child or dependent person, semicolon, leaves an illegal controlled substance unsecured where it can be accessed by a child or dependent person, semicolon, or recklessly, and then leaving the remainder of that section as is proposed.
Could you read that again, Mr. Branstetter, because it's tough to follow here a little bit.
Okay, again, I'm in subsection A, and
Right.
it says,
Of 916-020, correct?
and it's on page 4 of the ordinance, page 353 of our packet,
Correct.
so that it would read in its entirety, a person is guilty of the crime of endangerment of a controlled substance if the person uses an illegal controlled substance in the proximity of a child or dependent person, semicolon, leaves an illegal controlled substance unsecured where it can be accessed by a child or dependent person, semicolon, or recklessly, and then I would leave the wording that is there now, which would say recklessly permits a child or dependent person to ingest, inhale, absorb, or have contact with a controlled substance other than cannabis unless the controlled substance was obtained directly from or pursuant to a valid prescription or order of a practitioner while acting in the course of his or her professional practice.
Very good. To the extent everyone understands, is there a second to the motion to amend?
Second.
And seconded by Councilmember Pearson, that we amend ordinance number 823 as suggested by Councilmember Branstetter. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Lauricella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Branstetter, for proposing that. Following what our city attorney suggested, I feel like we should be moving forward with things as originally written and addressing this in a follow-on ordinance to remove the anticipated challenge that could come up with this in the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Mr. Lauricella's comments there. I like the language, and I do want to ultimately put something like that into our codes, but I also don't want it to be open for challenging as a whole. So I think that I agree with the city attorney's recommendations on that.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Branstetter.
Let me just respond that I am concerned that if we were to try to take and add these two elements to an offense in a separate ordinance at some undetermined time down the road to be able to go and do that, that's a needless delay. That the concern about someone challenging it is quite honestly, it's if that's going to be challenged, it's better to get a challenge like that resolved sooner rather than later. and a challenge that would narrowly challenge a provision of the ordinance, would end up taking some element of the ordinance out, even though I would disagree with it. I admit that we live in a society where we have legislative folks at the state level and in some of the larger communities of the state that are actually inclined to go in a different direction than us. They sort of look at the use of illegal substances as a victimless crime that doesn't impact anybody else. But I think that our responsibility, and I think the temperament of the residents in our community, is to protect children. Okay, and not just to act after a child has been hurt or suffered the negative consequences of accidentally finding or of being exposed and to people using controlled substances with the apparent suggestion that it must be all right. I mean, we're not really expecting children to be in the do as I say, not as I do. Didn't work for me 50 years ago, 60 years ago, to be able to go and do that. And quite frankly, it's even it's not even don't do as I say. It's just don't do what I do, without leaving that unsaid and just doing it and letting the child try to figure out that you really shouldn't be doing it, or leaving it to others to help a child make better decisions. I think that we need to, quite honestly, if we're going to actually say that it's permissive for folks, or we're going to reduce the severity of issues with the uses of controlled substances, it's kind of like free speech. You can say what you want as long as you aren't hurting someone else. Okay, as long as you're doing it. And maybe controlled substances have gotten to that point, but with respect to children, it's expecting children to protect themselves is not the right answer. We should have a tool to be able to go and do that. And I understand that having these elements in it will provide a challenge to our police department and our law enforcement folks. It's because it's more difficult than only worry about it once we're dealing with a child in an emergency room. But I think that if we can get through, because it's instances like these that, if discovered and are acted upon, that will preclude the next time around that child having that adverse consequence. This is going to be preventive, particularly if it can modify the behavior of adults. So, I would encourage us to adopt these changes now. Let challenges be where they are. If there is someone that wants to come that says, I'm entitled to smoke and use all the controlled substances I want in front of my children and my neighbor's children, and you shouldn't restrict that. Well, then let them have a court decide whether that's a valid argument that makes sense legally and that makes common sense to the community.
Thank you. Here are my thoughts, and I very much appreciate Mr. Brandstetter's proposed amendment, at least as to the intent, but I also am mindful of our city attorney's recommendation and the recommendation of the county staff who put some time into this. And here's why I believe the ordinance as drafted has, on some review tonight, has what I think we all want it to have. So The whereases talk about exposure being problematic, right? We've got State Department of Health reports about drug overdoses. We've got Washington Poison Center chatting about cases of accidental exposure, emergency room visits with overdoses involving these types of drugs. And the whereas it talks about exposure to controlled substances is a threat to the health and safety of all residents, especially children. So when you look at the proposed language, I think it accommodates all of that. And as a lawyer who gets to deal with this stuff, I'm thinking I would charge this if an adult in the presence of his child knowingly or recklessly, meaning you were using and you knowingly and recklessly permitted your kid to be there, to be exposed. How exposed? By inhaling, absorbing, or having contact with a controlled substance. Certainly if they ingested it, that would be more direct, but the others of inhaling, absorbing, or having contact with those indirect exposures that I believe the ordinance as drafted is sufficiently broad enough to be able to charge. That's kind of the way I read it. So I think the intent is well taken, but I am going to err on the side of some caution that what is drafted should be sufficient, at least enough for us to give it a go and see how it works. Councilmember Laura Sella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Branstetter, for your points. I think I didn't mean to suggest that we would postpone indefinitely an additional ordinance around exposure or proximity to children or others. So I'm not saying we postpone indefinitely. I'm saying that we should probably bring that forward sooner rather than later.
But as to the language of this one, I think your earlier comment, you were comfortable with it as drafted. Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Branstetter.
Well, Mr. Mayor, in response to your comments and to the county prosecutor's comments about the concern about the vagueness of exposure, and I would note that in the proposed amendment, term exposure is not included. It's designed to add two specific instances that are documented as dangerous to children or dependent persons and can lead to adverse consequences. And so I specifically wanted to avoid the vagueness that is attached to the word exposure, and indicate two specific instances that are documented in data around this that are dangerous, and thus appropriate in an ordinance about endangering.
Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree with Mr. Branstetter's comments about that. It really, these controlled substances, sometimes there isn't a second shot at some of this, where the language, I think, now is, if someone is to actually ingest, inhale, absorb, or have contact, well, we know that for a fact, sometimes folks contacting fentanyl, they only contact it one time. And, that's too late in some cases. And so that's where the seriousness of, just being around it in general, not that you have contacted it, but that it's in the room, or, and I think that Mr. Branstetter's comments were very concise and gave specific scenarios that I feel are valid, and that's I'm in support of the amendment. As it is now. So
Okay. Very good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we are voting on the amendment to proposed ordinance 823. All those in favor of the proposed amendment as articulated by Councilmember Branstetter signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. That would be 3-3. So the amendment, or 3-4 rather, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it passes, or it fails, excuse me, the amendment fails. Okay, I added my aye there just because I'm being helpful and thankful for your comments, but Mr. Branstetter, so the ordinance, sure.
None of the other members voted nay.
Oh, did I not say nay? No, I will ask for nay, but there was only 3 ayes, so I assume nay. But all those not in favor of the proposed amendment signify, excuse me, all those against the proposed amendment signify by saying nay.
Nay.
4-3. The proposed amendment fails. Thank you for clarifying. As I'm sitting up here, a little disoriented with the circumstances, but we are now back to ordinance number 823 without amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor of ordinance 823 as it stands, as proposed, signify by saying aye.
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 Yep. Is that a nay, Councilor Pearson?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Ordinance 823 has been adopted.
Mr. Mayor, looking for direction from the council. While I appreciate the vote, I also heard some interest in language coming forward independently. And so I will talk to the city manager about when the best time to bring that forward as an independent ordinance is, unless that's not the will of the council.
Well, let's think about what the independent crime would be. Would it be using in the presence of as opposed to recklessly exposing one to it?
It would be a section 9.16.025, and it would be labeled controlled substance in proximity of a child or dependent person. Subsection A would be the use, and subsection B would be the leaving it out. And that's only if that's of where the council was going. I'm trying to track with what you're wanting, because I understand that even as some of you voted against the amendment, you were asking that maybe something come forward. It doesn't have to be resolved tonight. You can let the city manager know.
Yep, we can certainly think about that, perhaps in council comments, if we want to move forward with that. It would be kind of helpful to get any anecdotal information the police department may have on whether this is an issue of significance, whether they've ever encountered it in Lakewood or not. That would be helpful. Okay, any other comments on that before we turn to unfinished or new business? Seeing none. I was going to ask Mr. Caulfield if we had any unfinished or new business, but I assume he's on the screen there. I don't believe we have any listed.
We do not, Mayor. Can
We
you
have
hear
some
me? No new business or any unfinished business.
Very good. Just report by the city manager then.
Well, good evening. I'm sorry. Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and council members. Just a few updates as it relates to your calendar. This Wednesday, give me a second here. This Wednesday at 8 a.m. over at Clover Park Technical College at the Rotunda, we'll have our annual employee recognition and appreciation event. It'd be really nice if the mayor and the council, if you have the opportunity to attend or at least stop by. Later on in the afternoon, I know myself and the deputy mayor and councilmember Branstetter will be heading out to Ording to attend AWC's District 6 meeting, where AWC personnel will be providing an update on the upcoming legislative session that's going to kick off, I believe it's January 13th, 2025, with a focus on AWC's key legislative priorities. The next day on Thursday the 5th, all day long, is the 15th annual Fallen Officer Food Drive, which is in partnership with EFN. And in addition, there's a blood drive to support Blood Works Northwest. So if you have an interest in that, there may still be some slots available to give blood. And then this coming Saturday, kicking off at 4:30, we have our annual holiday parade, and then Following that will be the Christmas tree lighting. Just a courtesy heads up that if you plan on riding or walking with the city float, to meet up no later than 4 p.m. at Park Lodge Elementary School. And again, you can either ride on the float or you can walk with the float. That would be your prerogative. And then a week from Friday on December 13th over at Thornwood Castle, we'll have our annual dinner event with the 2-2 Stryker Brigade, our community connector. And then on the next day, a week from Saturday on the 14th, we have the Jingle Bell Run over at Forest Hillocan Park. And then the last event, if council's so interested, the Tacoma Pierce County Chamber is having their public officials holiday reception on December 18th at the LeMay America's Car Museum in Tacoma. So with that, Mayor, that's my report. And I apologize, I wasn't able to be in attendance to your meeting this evening, just feeling a little under the weather, just wanted to be safe than sorry. So, but with that, back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Caulfield. You may sound hoarse, but you're looking as sharp as ever. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Mayor. My wife dresses me.
Any questions of Mr. Caulfield? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and turn to council comments. Mr. Brandstetter, we'll start with you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have been working on a county work group regarding the working on a unified approach to homelessness that has been being chaired by Council Member Hitchens, our representative from District 6 on the county council. That they've I was on the group that worked to identify a consultant to lead this project, and then tomorrow I'll be having a one-on-one meeting with the lead on that consultant team to talk to him about what's going on, and you know, a couple of the themes that I plan to bring forward is that while we're looking for a unified approach countywide, that there needs to be some recognition that different communities, including Lakewood, have different circumstances around homelessness and different aspirations, and that needs to be recognized, in that a unified approach doesn't mean a one approach fits all, being able to go and do that. So that's a process that's expected to take 8 to 9 months to come up with a plan, and then a year with a consultant-led implementation piece. All the while there is Lakewood and other communities pouring money into homelessness resolution issues, and to include perhaps some adjustments at the county in terms of preferred strategies to go on. So we'll have to see where that goes. It's sort of embryonic process right now to try to bring some common rationality to how it's approached within the county. I plan to attend the AWC District 6 meeting on Wednesday, and then I'm looking to be at the parade on Saturday to be able to go and do, and I reserve the decision about whether to walk or ride, depending on the weather, and whether there's a top on the truck or not.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilmember Boki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This week, it looks like I've got South Sound Housing Affordability Partners on Friday morning. And we also have a planning commission meeting on Wednesday night. I don't know if that's still going or not. I haven't received anything yet. I will be at the parade, hoping to make the employee recognition, stopping by the Fallen Officers Food Drive. So busy week. Appreciate all that. on the proximity thing, I have reservations about that for the reasons stated by legal, right? I mean, I don't think proximity seems like, I don't know, your proximity and my proximity are maybe not the same. And I think there are unintended consequences to the proximity argument that in this community could have really, really bad impacts. Somebody's at somebody's house and there's proximity, and how's that used, and dealing with child custody and various things like that. I think there's a lot of elements to this that we don't understand. And I'm tending to believe the lawyers on this, that vagueness is not something that we should take on. But that's just me. Anyway, that's where I'm at with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lauricella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to thank our youth council members for their recommendations today. I look forward to seeing those written so that we can take them under advisement and use that to drive some of our decision making. I will be at the holiday parade on Saturday. Looking forward to that. I'm going to try and make it to the employee breakfast on Wednesday and the blood drive on Thursday as well. I have a public safety advisory board Wednesday evening that I'll be at, and then next week, I'll be at the school district board meeting before our council meeting. Next week, I also have South Sound 911 and the Pierce County Climate Conversation meeting. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for going to that. Councilmember Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I will just reiterate what everyone has spoken about. Wednesday is the employee recognition breakfast, and I plan on being there. Also, I plan on being at the parade this weekend. And like Councilmember Lauricella stated about the Youth Council, they continue to amaze me with their presentation, their action plans, everything. I just think that they're doing just a great job, and I'm looking forward to seeing their recommendations. Thank you.
Great. Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Thursday, I do plan to attend the Palms Board meeting. And then I'm looking forward to the parade on Saturday. I will be going to the AWC District's conference on Wednesday and the Fallen Heroes event on Thursday. And as far as the Youth Council, I just want to share that Alexandra came and took over the LMCC booth at Summerfest. And she brought all of her students, the fellow students, and they actually took over and they ran it excellently. So I was really excited to see that she was chosen and nominated for the AWC scholarship. So I hope she's successful with that. She deserves it. So other than that, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I too plan to attend the employee recognition event on Wednesday. The Fallen Officer Food Drive, I'll try to drop by on Thursday. And then on Saturday, we've got the Christmas tree lighting. Of course, I'll be there for the parade and the Christmas tree lighting. There is, for those of us, I think who know, our former city manager, Andrew Knights, his spouse passed away, and there's a memorial for her at 2 at Little Church on the Prairie. And so I plan to attend that. And then, of course, the brigade dinner with the 2-2 on the 13th, the Jingle Bell Dash. I didn't hear a lot of you chime in for that, so I look forward to seeing you all there for the Jingle Bell Dash on the 14th. And then we'll follow up with the public officials event on the 18th. So it should be a busy couple of weeks. Any alibis for the good of the order? Deputy Mayor, did you want to sign up for the race, the Jingle Bell Dash? Were you thinking about that?
I will probably be there to cheer you on.
All right, very good. Sounds good. All right, thank you for all the
Mr. Mayor.
tonight, and for the Youth Council. We're adjourned. Oh, Councilor Pearson, you're right. I passed you up. There's his hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be attending the lighting and parade on Saturday, and then I hopefully will be going to the employee recognition on Wednesday, and I have PSRC on Thursday. Yeah, that's my quick update. Thanks.
And what about the Jingle Bell Dash?
My son wants to go, so I that is actually on my calendar as a thing of interest. Is there any space on the float or anything for kids?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. I might bring a few with me.
There's a 12-page waiver you have to sign first, but
I'm sure.
legal will prepare that and send it over to you.
Thanks.
All right, very good. Any other alibis that I may have missed? Thank you, Mr. Pierce.